The cold, sterile lights of St. Mary's Children's Hospital cast harsh shadows across the pediatric ward, but nobody expected what they were about to witness in room 237. The massive police German Shepherd lay sprawled across the tiny hospital bed, his enormous frame dwarfing the fragile 5-year-old girl beneath him. Nurses whispered nervously in the hallway. Doctors exchanged worried glances. Security had been called twice, but nobody dared approach. The dog's eyes never left the child's face, and every time someone stepped too close, a low, warning growl rumbled from his chest like distant thunder. "He hasn't moved in 16 hours, Nurse Patricia whispered, clutching her clipboard. "Won't eat, won't drink, won't let anyone near her." Dr. Marcus Chen, the head pediatrician, stood at the doorway, his face etched with concern. He'd seen devoted therapy animals before, but this was different. This was something else entirely. The German Shepherd's breathing matched the little girl's perfectly. Rise and fall, as if he were breathing for her, willing her to keep going. The girl, Emma Grace Sullivan, lay unconscious beneath the dog's protective weight. Her golden hair spread across the white pillow like spilled sunshine, her tiny hand buried in the dog's thick fur. The heart monitor beeped steadily, but her condition hadn't improved in days. Brain scans showed minimal activity. The prognosis was grim. Her parents had already been gently prepared for the worst, but the dog refused to accept it. Officer Jake Morrison stood in the corner, his uniform wrinkled from 3 days of barely leaving the hospital. "Rex won't listen to commands," he said quietly. "I've never seen him like this. He's been my partner for 7 years, saved my life more times than I can count. But right now," he trailed off, shaking his head. "It's like he knows something we don't." Rex wasn't just any police dog. He was a decorated canine unit, trained in search and rescue, drug detection, suspect apprehension. He'd won medals, appeared in newspapers, been called a hero by the mayor himself. But none of that mattered now. All that mattered was the little girl beneath him, the one he refused to leave. "How did this even start?" Dr. Chen asked, though he'd heard the story before. Sometimes repeating it helped make sense of the inexplicable. Morrison rubbed his tired eyes. 3 months ago, we were doing a routine patrol through Riverside Park. Emma was there with her mom, feeding ducks by the pond. Rex just connected with her instantly, started visiting her every day after our shifts. Her mom said Emma had been struggling, anxiety, nightmares, wouldn't talk much after her dad passed away last year. But with Rex, she came alive again. Patricia nodded slowly. "I've seen the videos her mother posted online. That dog would let her paint his nails, dress him in tutus, use him as a pillow. He'd follow her around like a shadow." "More than that," Morrison continued. "Last week, Emma had been complaining about headaches. Her mom thought it was just stress from starting kindergarten. Then, during one of our visits, Rex started acting strange, kept nudging her head, whining, wouldn't let her run around like usual. He actually grabbed her shirt and pulled her to sit down every time she tried to play." Dr. Chen's eyebrows rose. "When did she collapse?" "That same evening. Massive brain hemorrhage from an undiagnosed arteriovenous malformation. If she'd been running around, if her heart rate had spiked," Morrison's voice cracked. "Rex knew. Somehow, he knew something was wrong before any of us did." The room fell silent, except for the steady beep of machines and Rex's deep breathing. The dog's ears twitched at every sound, every footstep in the hallway, every whispered conversation. His muscles were coiled tight beneath his fur, ready to defend against any threat, real or imagined. "We need to examine her," Dr. Chen said gently. "Run more tests, check her vitals properly. He has to let us help her." Morrison stepped forward. "Rex, come." The dog didn't even acknowledge him. "Rex, off." Nothing. Morrison moved closer, reaching for Rex's collar. The growl that emanated from the dog's chest made everyone in the room step back. It wasn't aggressive exactly, it was desperate, protective. the sound of an animal who would die before abandoning his post. "What if?" Patricia started, then stopped. "No, it's crazy." "What?" Dr. Chen prompted. "What if he really does know something? Animals have instincts we don't understand. There are documented cases of dogs detecting cancer, seizures, diabetic episodes. What if Rex is sensing something our machines can't?" Dr. Chen wanted to dismiss it as emotional thinking, but he'd been a doctor long enough to know that medicine didn't have all the answers. Sometimes the unexplainable happened. Sometimes intuition trumped technology. "All right," he said finally, "we give it more time. But if her condition deteriorates, if she needs emergency intervention, that dog has to move." Morrison nodded, though they all knew it would take a team of officers to remove Rex if it came to that, and even then, the damage to the dog's psyche might be irreversible. Canine units formed bonds with their handlers, but what Rex had with Emma went beyond training, beyond logic, beyond anything any of them had seen before. As the hours ticked by, more hospital staff gathered outside room 237. Word had spread through the pediatric ward, then to other floors. Nurses on break came to peek through the doorway. Janitors paused in their duties. Even other patients' families found excuses to walk by, drawn by the story of the dog who wouldn't leave. Emma's mother, Sarah Sullivan, sat in a chair beside the bed, her eyes red from crying. She hadn't slept in days, hadn't eaten more than crackers and coffee. Her hand rested on Rex's back, finding comfort in his solid presence. "He loved her from the moment they met," she whispered to no one in particular. "Emma was so scared of dogs after a neighbor's pet bit her when she was 3. But Rex just lay down at her feet that first day, made himself small, let her approach on her own terms. Within minutes, she was hugging him." Morrison remembered that day clearly. He'd been shocked when Rex, usually all business during patrol hours, had broken protocol to comfort a crying child. It was like the dog had recognized a kindred spirit, another soul who'd known loss and fear and needed healing. "The doctors said the bleeding has stopped," Sarah continued, her voice hollow. "But the damage, they don't know if she'll wake up, and if she does, they don't know who she'll be." Rex's tail moved slightly, just a twitch, the first movement he'd made in hours besides breathing. His dark eyes remained fixed on Emma's face, watching for any sign, any flutter of eyelashes, any hint that she was still in there, still fighting. Dr. Chen returned with the latest test results, his face grave. "Her intracranial pressure is stable, but brain activity remains minimal. We're not seeing the improvement we'd hoped for." "What are you saying?" Sarah asked, though she already knew. "I'm saying we need to discuss options, quality of life decisions. I know this is impossibly hard, but—" Rex's head shot up. A growl, different from before, rumbled through the room. Not a warning this time, but something else, urgency, insistence. He began nudging Emma's face with his nose, gentle but persistent, like he was trying to wake her from a nap. "Rex, no," Morrison said, stepping forward. "You'll hurt her." But Rex wasn't listening. He pressed his paw against her chest, whined high and desperate, then did something that made everyone freeze. He barked, once, loud and sharp, right next to her ear. "Get him off her," Dr. Proctor brabbed. Chen ordered, rushing forward. But before anyone could move, Emma's eyes fluttered open. For a moment, nobody breathed. The machines continued their steady beeping, but the humans in the room might as well have been statues. Emma's gaze was unfocused, confused, but undeniably conscious. "Mama?" she whispered, her voice tiny and hoarse. Sarah let out a sob that seemed to come from the depths of her soul. "Baby! Oh, my baby! I'm here! I'm right here!" Rex's entire body was trembling now, his tail wagging so hard it shook the bed. He licked Emma's face frantically, whimpering with what could only be described as joy. The little girl's hand found his fur, gripping weakly but deliberately. "Rex," she said, the words slurred but clear. "I was lost in the dark, but he kept calling me back." Dr. Chen was already checking monitors, shining lights in her eyes, testing reflexes. Everything he saw defied medical explanation. Brain activity that had been minimal moments ago was spiking. Responses that should have been impossible were happening before his eyes. "This shouldn't be possible," he muttered. Then, louder, "I need a full team in here now. New scans, complete neurological workup." The room exploded into controlled chaos as medical staff rushed in. But through it all, Rex never moved from Emma's side. He adjusted his position to allow the doctor's access, but his body remained pressed against hers, a furry guardian angel who'd refused to give up when everyone else had been ready to let go. Morrison watched in amazement as his partner, his tough, disciplined police dog, gently nuzzled Emma's cheek while she giggled weakly. 7 years they'd worked together. 7 years of chasing down criminals, searching for drugs, protecting and serving. But this, Morrison realized, might be the most important thing Rex had ever done. As news of Emma's awakening spread through the hospital, a crowd gathered outside her room. Doctors who'd declared her case hopeless came to see for themselves. Nurses who'd whispered about preparing the family for loss now wiped away tears of joy. The story was already spreading beyond the hospital walls, shared in hushed, amazed tones. But in room 237, none of that mattered. There was only a little girl slowly coming back to life, and the dog who'd known all along that she would. Rex's eyes were closed now, his great head resting beside Emma's on the pillow, finally allowing exhaustion to claim him. His job wasn't done. He wouldn't leave her side for days yet, but the hardest part was over. Emma's fingers stroked his fur weakly as she looked up at her mother. "Rex told me not to go to sleep forever," she said, her 5-year-old voice matter-of-fact despite the impossibility of her words. "He said you needed me. He said I had more paintings to make for him." Sarah laughed through her tears. Unable to process what she was hearing but not caring, her daughter was alive, alert, talking. The how and why could wait. Dr. Chen stood back, watching the scene with a mixture of professional confusion and personal awe. He'd devoted his career to science, to facts and data and provable hypotheses. But sometimes, he thought, watching Rex's protective paw rest over Emma's small hand, sometimes love was its own kind of medicine. Sometimes faith had 4 legs and a tail. The next hours would bring more tests, more questions, more attempts to explain the unexplainable. Neurologists would puzzle over scans that showed damage reversing in ways that challenged medical understanding. Psychologists would theorize about the power of the human-animal bond. News crews would eventually arrive, wanting to capture the story of the miracle in room 237. But for Rex, there was no mystery. He'd simply done what he'd always done since the day he met Emma in the park. He'd protected her. He'd stayed by her side. He'd refused to let her go. And when she'd been lost in whatever darkness had claimed her, he'd called her back the only way he knew how, with loyalty that transcended species, with love that defied logic, with faith that moved mountains, or at least moved one little girl from the edge of forever sleep back to the world that needed her. Morrison pulled out his phone to check the time and saw dozens of messages. The story was already spreading through the police department. His fellow officers wanted to know if it was true, if Rex had really done what everyone was saying. He didn't respond. There would be time for that later. Right now, he just wanted to watch his partner, the decorated police dog who'd found his greatest purpose not in catching criminals or winning awards, but in loving a little girl back to life. Patricia approached him quietly. "In 20 years of pediatric nursing, I've never seen anything like this." "Neither have I," Morrison admitted.
But then again, I've never seen Rex fail at anything he set his mind to. You think he really knew? That he could sense she'd wake up? Morrison looked at his partner, now snoring softly beside Emma, who was weakly trying to braid his ear fur while her mother helped. I think Rex knew exactly what Emma needed, and he wasn't going to let anyone, not even death itself, take her before she was ready. The machines continued their steady rhythm, but now they sang a different song. Not a dirge, but a celebration. Heart rate, strong. Oxygen levels, improving. Brain activity, remarkable. And in the middle of it all, a dog and a little girl. Proof that sometimes the most powerful medicine couldn't be found in any textbook or prescribed by any doctor. Sometimes it walked on 4 legs, wore a badge, and refused to give up on the people it loved. As the sun sat outside the hospital window, casting golden light across the room, Emma's voice, small but determined, cut through the medical chatter. "When can Rex and I go to the park again?" Dr. Chen, checking her charts for the dozenth time, actually laughed. "Let's focus on getting you better first, sweetheart." Emma nodded solemnly, then looked at Rex. "You'll wait for me, won't you?" The dog opened one eye, thumped his tail twice against the bed, and went back to sleep. Of course he would wait. He'd already proven he'd wait forever if that's what it took. And everyone in that room, from the skeptical doctors to the exhausted parents to the hardened police officer, knew with absolute certainty that when Emma was finally well enough to return to that park, Rex would be right there beside her, just as he'd been beside her through the darkness, calling her back to the light with nothing more and nothing less than pure, unshakable love. The story should have ended there, but it was only just beginning. Because what happened next would challenge everything the medical community thought they knew about recovery, about the connection between minds and hearts, and about the incredible power of a bond that refused to be broken. Rex had done more than save Emma's life. He'd opened a door to questions that would ripple through the hospital and beyond, touching lives in ways no one could have imagined. But all of that would come later. For now there was just a little girl, slowly returning to herself, and a dog who'd known all along that she would. The monitors beeped their reassuring rhythm. The hospital continued its never-ending bustle, but in room 237 time seemed to stop. There was peace here, the kind that comes after a storm when you realize the foundation held, the house still stands, and everyone you love is safe. Rex shifted slightly, careful not to disturb Emma, and Morrison could have sworn he saw the dog smile. Not the panting, tongue-out expression people often mistook for a smile, but something deeper in his eyes, a satisfaction that went beyond training or instinct. Rex had completed his mission, the most important one of his life, and now he could rest. But only for a moment, because Emma was starting to tell her mother about the dream she'd had while she was asleep, dreams where Rex had been there, keeping the scary shadows away, and the medical team was leaning in, listening with a mixture of skepticism and wonder that would soon turn to serious scientific inquiry. The police dog who refused to leave had done more than save one little girl. He'd reminded everyone in that hospital, and soon everyone who heard the story, that sometimes the most powerful forces in the universe couldn't be measured or quantified. Sometimes they could only be felt in the steady breathing of a faithful friend who simply refused to say goodbye. Outside room 237, the hallway was filling with people again.
Not just medical staff now, but other patients' families, hospital administrators, even a few off-duty employees who'd heard the news and had to see for themselves. They spoke in hushed voices, sharing their own stories of pets who'd known things, of connections that defied explanation, of love that transcended the possible. And inside the room, oblivious to the growing audience, Emma was trying to teach Rex a new trick, her voice still weak but determined. The dog, exhausted from his vigil, nevertheless lifted his paw on command, earning a delighted giggle that was worth more than all his commendations combined. "He's the best dog in the whole world," Emma announced to everyone and no one. Morrison nodded, blinking back tears he wasn't ashamed to shed. "Yeah, Emma, he really is." The sun had fully set now, and the hospital lights cast their familiar glow. But something had changed in room 237. What had been a place of impending loss had become a shrine to hope. What had been a death watch had become a celebration. And at the center of it all, a police dog continued his faithful guard, no longer keeping death at bay, but simply being what he'd always been to Emma, a friend, a protector, a reminder that love was the strongest force in any universe. The medical reports would be written, the scientific papers would be published, the news stories would circle the globe. But they would all miss the essential truth that everyone in that room understood. Sometimes a dog just knows. And sometimes that knowing is enough to call someone back from the darkness, to anchor them to life when all the machines and medicines have failed. Rex yawned, showing impressive teeth that had taken down dangerous criminals, then gently licked Emma's cheek as she started to drift off to natural healing sleep. He would be here when she woke. He would be here tomorrow, and the day after, and every day she needed him, because that's what heroes do. Whether they wear badges or collars, they stay, they guard, they love. And sometimes, against all odds and medical probability, that's enough to work miracles. The story was spreading through St. Mary's like wildfire, but what the curious onlookers didn't know was that Rex's vigil was far from over. 3 days after Emma's miraculous awakening, the real challenges were just beginning to surface. Dr. Chen stood before a packed conference room, addressing a team of neurologists, psychiatrists, and specialists who'd been called in from across the state. "The patient shows signs of consciousness, but her neurological readings are unusual," he said, pulling up brain scans on the projector. "Look at these patterns. They spike whenever the dog is present and drop significantly when he leaves the room, even briefly." Dr. Rebecca Martinez, a renowned neurologist from Johns Hopkins, leaned forward. "Are you suggesting the animal's presence is somehow affecting her brain activity?" "I'm not suggesting anything," Dr. Chen replied carefully. "I'm simply presenting the data. In 48 hours, we've run the same tests 17 times. The results are consistent. When Rex is touching her, her neural pathways light up in ways that shouldn't be possible given the extent of her injury." Meanwhile, in room 237, Emma was experiencing something the doctors couldn't measure with their machines. She'd been trying to explain it to her mother, but the words of a 5-year-old couldn't quite capture what she felt. "When I was sleeping the big sleep," she said, playing with Rex's ears, "everything was dark and scary, but Rex was there. Not like here, there, but inside there." She tapped her chest. "He showed me the way back." Sarah Sullivan held her daughter's hand, trying to understand. "What do you mean, sweetheart? How did he show you?" Emma frowned, concentrating. "His voice was different. Not barking. It was like when you think really loud but don't say words. He kept telling me you were waiting. He showed me pictures." "Pictures?" "Of us at the park, of my birthday, of Daddy before he went to heaven." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "Rex said Daddy wanted me to stay with you." Sarah felt her breath catch. They'd never told Emma that her father's last words had been about wanting his girls to take care of each other. How could she know? Rex lifted his head, watching the conversation with those intelligent dark eyes. Morrison, who'd been listening from his corner chair, noticed something odd. The dog's breathing had synced perfectly with Emma's again, and the heart monitor showed their rhythms aligning. "Doc," Morrison called to a passing resident, "come look at this." The young doctor checked the readings, then did a double take. That can't be right. Their heartbeats are synchronizing. That's not medically possible." But possible or not, it was happening. And it wasn't the only strange thing occurring in room 237. Night had fallen again, and the hospital had settled into its quieter rhythm. Emma should have been sleeping, but she was wide awake, whispering to Rex in the darkness. Sarah dozed in the chair beside them, exhausted from days of worry. "Do you remember the bad man?" Emma asked Rex quietly. The dog's ears perked up, his body tensing slightly. "The one who was following us in the park before I got sick?" Morrison, who'd been half asleep himself, snapped to attention. "Emma, what bad man?" The little girl looked surprised to find him awake. "The man in the blue hat. He kept watching us at the park. Rex didn't like him. He would growl and stand between us." Morrison's blood ran cold. They'd had reports of a suspicious person near the park, someone who'd been approaching children, but they'd never connected it to Emma. "When was this, sweetheart?" "The day before my head hurt real bad. Rex wouldn't let me go on the swings. He kept pushing me back to Mama. The man was there, behind the trees." Morrison was already reaching for his radio. If there had been a potential predator, if Rex had been protecting Emma from more than just her medical condition. "All units, this is Canine Officer Morrison. I need someone to pull surveillance footage from Riverside Park, focusing on the playground area. Dates." As Morrison coordinated with dispatch, Rex had positioned himself more protectively around Emma, his eyes constantly scanning the room's entrance. The dog's behavior, which everyone had attributed to Emma's medical crisis, suddenly took on a different dimension. Dr. Chen arrived, having been called back by the night staff. "What's going on?" Morrison quickly explained, and the doctor's face paled. "Are you saying Rex might have been trying to keep her safe from multiple threats?" "I'm saying that dog knew something was wrong before any of us did. Maybe more than one thing." The next hours brought a flurry of activity. Security footage was reviewed, revealing a man matching Emma's description who'd been loitering near the playground. He'd disappeared the day Emma collapsed, but facial recognition was already running. Rex's protective behavior, his refusal to let Emma play normally that day, took on new meaning. He was hurting her, Morrison realized, watching the footage. Classic protective herding behavior. He was trying to keep her in sight of adults, away from isolated areas where he couldn't finish the sentence. Emma, unaware of the gravity of what she'd revealed, had finally fallen asleep, but Rex remained vigilant. His training was kicking in now, the part that made him not just a companion, but a guardian. Every sound in the hallway earned a quick ear twitch. Every new person entering the room got a thorough assessment. Dr. Martinez had been observing all of this with growing fascination. "Officer Morrison," she said quietly, "I'd like to propose something unconventional. We've been trying to understand Emma's recovery through traditional medicine, but what if we're looking at this wrong? What if the connection between them isn't just emotional, but something more?" "What are you suggesting?" "I've been researching cases of extreme human-animal bonds. There are documented instances of physiological synchronization, shared stress responses, even claims of telepathic connections that mainstream science dismisses but can't fully disprove. What if Rex and Emma have developed something beyond what we typically see?" Morrison watched his partner, remembering all the times Rex had seemed to know things he shouldn't. The drug busts where he'd alerted to hidden stashes in impossible places. The search and rescue operations where he'd found victims against all odds. "He's always been special," he admitted. "But this? This is unprecedented," Dr. Martinez finished. "And I think we need to study it, not to exploit it, but to understand it. Because if we can figure out what's happening between them, it might help other children in similar situations." The investigation into the suspicious man accelerated when the facial recognition came back with a match. Robert Henley, registered sex offender, had been violating his parole by being near the playground. Police units were already moving to apprehend him, but the revelation added another layer to Rex's story. "He wasn't just sensing her medical condition," Morrison said in amazement. "He was protecting her from a predator at the same time. That's why he was so agitated that day, torn between two threats to his girl." Sarah, who'd woken during the commotion, pulled Emma closer. "He saved her twice over." "Maybe more than that," Dr. Chen interjected. He'd been reviewing Emma's medical history, cross-referencing it with the timeline of Rex's behaviors.
Look at this. 3 weeks ago. Emma's teacher noted she seemed tired, having headaches. That's when Rex started his daily visits to her house after shifts, right? Morrison nodded. He started whining to go there. I thought he just missed her. But what if he sensed the AVM developing? What if he'd been monitoring her for weeks, trying to tell us something was wrong? The implications were staggering. If Rex had been detecting Emma's condition that early, it challenged everything they knew about canine capabilities. But the evidence was mounting, and it was becoming harder to dismiss as coincidence. As dawn broke over the hospital, bringing with it another day of tests and observations, a news van pulled up outside. Someone had leaked the story, not just of Emma's miraculous recovery, but of Rex's multi-layered protection. The headline wrote itself, "Hero Canine Saves Girl from Predator and Medical Crisis." But inside room 237, the principals of this drama remained unaware of their growing fame. Emma had woken hungry for the first time since her collapse, and Rex was supervising her breakfast with the seriousness of a trained professional. "He says I need to eat all my eggs," Emma informed her mother matter-of-factly. "They'll make me strong." Sarah had stopped questioning these pronouncements. Whether Emma was interpreting Rex's body language or something more was happening, the results spoke for themselves. Her daughter was eating, talking, improving by the hour. Dr. Martinez had set up monitoring equipment overnight, trying to capture whatever was happening between the pair. The readings were fascinating but confusing. Brain waves that seemed to sync up, heart rates that matched, even breathing patterns that aligned when they touched. "It's like they're operating as a single biological system," she murmured, studying the data. "I've never seen anything like it." Morrison's radio crackled. "Unit 7 to K9 Morrison, we have Henley in custody. He had evidence in his vehicle. Photos of children from the park. Your girl's picture was there." The room went silent, except for the steady beep of machines and Rex's deep breathing. Emma, thankfully, was focused on her breakfast and didn't understand the implications. But every adult in the room felt the chill of what might have been. "He had plans," the voice on the radio continued, "detailed plans. If your dog hadn't kept her close that day." Morrison clicked off the radio, not wanting to hear more with Emma present. He looked at Rex with new respect. They'd worked together for 7 years, but he'd never fully appreciated the depths of his partner's instincts. "You knew," he said quietly to Rex. "You knew about the medical condition, you knew about the predator, and you protected her from both. How?" Rex merely wagged his tail slightly and returned his attention to Emma, who was trying to share her scrambled eggs with him despite everyone telling her not to feed him people food. Dr. Chen gathered the medical team in the hallway. "We need to make some decisions about Emma's care going forward. Her recovery is progressing faster than anything in the literature, but it seems tied to Rex's presence. Do we continue allowing him full access?" "How can we not?" Dr. Martinez argued. "Whatever's happening between them, it's working. To separate them now could be detrimental to her recovery." "But we can't have a police dog living in a hospital room indefinitely," another doctor protested. "There are protocols, health regulations." Morrison stepped into the conversation. "With all due respect, Rex has done more for that little girl than all your protocols combined. He detected a brain bleed weeks before symptoms showed. He identified a predator none of us noticed. He somehow kept her conscious mind anchored when she should have been gone. I think he's earned the right to stay as long as she needs him." The debate continued, but inside the room, Emma and Rex were oblivious to the bureaucratic concerns. They were playing a game where Emma would hide a small toy under her blanket, and Rex would pretend to search for it, making her giggle each time he found it in increasingly silly places. "He's letting me win," Emma confided to her mother in a stage whisper. "He knows where it is the whole time." Sarah smiled, the first real smile she'd managed in days.
That's because he loves you, baby." "I love him too," Emma said simply. "We're best friends forever and ever. He promised." Morrison overheard this and found himself wondering, not for the first time, what exactly transpired in those dark hours when Emma had been unconscious. What promises had been made? What connection forged? And how had a police dog trained for violence and danger become the gentle guardian of a 5-year-old girl? The answer, Morrison was beginning to suspect, lay somewhere beyond the reach of science or logic. It lived in that mysterious space where love and loyalty intersected with something greater than human understanding. As the morning progressed, more specialists arrived. Veterinary behaviorists, experts in human-animal bonds, researchers who'd spent their careers studying interspecies communication. They all wanted to observe, to test, to understand what was happening in room 237. But Rex, with the wisdom of an animal who'd seen the worst and best of humanity, ignored them all. His focus remained singular: the little girl who needed him, who still needed him, and who he would protect with every fiber of his being for as long as necessary. The machines continued their monitoring, the doctors continued their debates, and the world outside began to take notice of the miracle unfolding in a small hospital room. But at the center of it all were two souls who'd found each other in a park, faced darkness together, and emerged into the light still connected by bonds that science couldn't explain but couldn't deny either. The story was far from over. There would be more tests, more revelations, more challenges ahead. Emma's recovery, while miraculous, was still fragile. The investigation into the predator would reveal disturbing details about how close danger had come. The medical community would struggle to understand and document what had occurred. But for now, in the morning light of room 237, there was peace. A little girl was healing. A dog was standing guard. And somewhere in the space between the possible and the impossible, love was working its quiet magic, one heartbeat at a time. The following weeks at St. Mary's Children's Hospital would become the subject of medical journals, news documentaries, and scientific debates for years to come. But in the moment, as October rain drummed against the windows of the pediatric ward, the focus remained on the inexplicable bond between a police dog and a little girl who'd defied every medical prediction. Dr. Martinez had set up what she called the most comprehensive interspecies monitoring system ever assembled in a hospital setting. Cameras recorded every angle of room 237. Sensors tracked movement, temperature, heart rate, brain activity. Even Rex had been fitted with a special vest containing monitoring equipment, though he'd only accepted it after Emma solemnly explained that it would help the doctors understand how he'd saved her. "See, Rex gets a special uniform too," Emma had announced proudly, patting his vest, "just like when he's working with Officer Jake." What the equipment revealed defied conventional understanding. When Emma slept, Rex's brainwaves would shift to match hers within minutes. When she experienced pain or discomfort, his heart rate would spike moments before hers, as if he sensed it coming. Most remarkably, during Emma's physical therapy sessions, Rex would position himself in ways that seemed to anticipate her needs, offering support before she stumbled, nudging her forward when she hesitated. "It's like he's reading her mind," the physical therapist, Janet Wu, said after a particularly intense session. "I've worked with therapy animals for 20 years. This goes beyond training or instinct. He knows what she needs before she does." Morrison had taken extended leave to stay at the hospital, officially to monitor his canine partner, but everyone knew it was more than that. He'd become part of Emma's recovery team, part of her extended family. The tough cop who'd faced down armed criminals found himself reading picture books and learning the names of all Emma's stuffed animals. "Mr. Jake," Emma said one afternoon, her speech clearer each day, "did you know Rex can see colors that aren't there?" Morrison looked up from the coloring book they were sharing. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "He sees the hurt colors around my head sometimes,"
They're purple and angry, but when he puts his head on my tummy, they go away." Morrison exchanged glances with Dr. Martinez, who was discreetly taking notes. They'd been documenting everything Emma said about her connection with Rex, no matter how fantastical it seemed. Too many of her observations had proven eerily accurate to dismiss anything as mere childhood imagination. The investigation into Robert Henley had revealed a disturbing pattern. He'd been stalking several children at the park, but Emma had been his primary target. Surveillance footage showed him following her and her mother on multiple occasions, always keeping just far enough away to avoid suspicion. Except Rex had noticed. The dog's behavior patterns changed 17 days before Emma's collapse, Detective Linda Washington explained to the assembled team. He started positioning himself between Emma and specific areas of the park, areas where Henley typically positioned himself. It's like Rex was creating a protective perimeter. "But how could he know Henley was a threat?" Dr. Chen asked. "Dogs can sense aggression, fear, but to identify a predator who wasn't displaying obvious threatening behavior." Morrison thought back to all the times Rex had alerted to dangers others missed. Maybe it's not about what we think dogs can sense. Maybe it's about what we don't understand about how they perceive the world. Emma's recovery continued to astonish everyone. Her motor skills, which should have taken months to return, were improving daily. Her cognitive function showed no signs of the damage the initial scans had indicated. But perhaps most remarkably, she seemed to have developed abilities that hadn't been there before. "Mama," Emma said one morning, "Rex says the nice nurse is sad today. Her baby is sick." Sarah started to dismiss it as imagination, but Patricia, who just entered the room, froze. She hadn't told anyone that her infant son had been admitted to the ER the night before with a severe fever. "How did you?" Patricia began, then looked at Rex, who was watching her with those knowing eyes. "Never mind, I think I already know." Dr. Martinez documented everything: the seemingly telepathic communications, the physical synchronization, the predictive behaviors. Her preliminary paper, cautiously titled "Observed Anomalous Interspecies Connections in a Medical Setting," was already generating interest from researchers worldwide. But the academic interest paled beside the human drama unfolding daily. Emma's father's parents, who lived across the country, had flown in to see their granddaughter. They'd been skeptical of the miracle dog stories until they witnessed it themselves. "David would have loved this," Emma's grandmother, Ruth, said tearfully, watching Rex gently guide Emma through her walking exercises. "He always said Emma was special, that she'd do amazing things. I think he would have understood this connection." "Rex knew Daddy," Emma said matter-of-factly, overhearing the conversation. "Not here, knew, but heart knew. That's why he picked me." These cryptic statements had become common. Emma spoke of things she couldn't possibly know, always attributing the knowledge to Rex. She'd correctly predicted when other patients would take turns for better or worse. She'd known when a severe storm was coming hours before the weather service issued warnings. Most unsettling, she'd identified a nurse who was stealing medications, simply saying, "Rex doesn't trust her. She has shadow colors." The nurse was arrested 2 days later. As October turned to November, the media attention intensified. The hospital had to post security to keep reporters from sneaking onto the pediatric ward. Social media was flooded with videos of Rex and Emma, their story inspiring millions. Donations poured in for the hospital's animal therapy program. Other families with sick children begged to meet the miracle dog. But Rex had eyes only for Emma. He tolerated brief visits with other children, always gentle, always patient, but he would inevitably return to room 237, to his post beside her bed. "He's getting tired," Morrison observed one evening, noting the gray creeping into Rex's muzzle that he'd swear hadn't been there a month ago. "This kind of constant vigilance, it's taking a toll." Dr. Chen nodded. "We've run tests. His stress hormones are elevated, but not dangerously so. It's more like like he's aging faster, as if whatever he's doing for Emma is costing him something. The thought sent a chill through everyone who'd grown to love the devoted dog. But when they tried to give Rex breaks, to encourage him to rest in the special area they'd set up for him, he would comply for exactly as long as it took them to leave, then return to Emma's side. "He knows what he's doing," Emma said when they expressed concern. "He said it's worth it. He said love always costs something, but that's what makes it real." No 5-year-old should speak with such wisdom, but then again, nothing about Emma was typical anymore. The brain scans showed unusual activity in regions associated with empathy and intuition. Her drawings, always featuring Rex, had taken on an almost luminous quality, as if she were seeing and capturing something others couldn't perceive. One particularly difficult night, Emma's condition suddenly deteriorated. Her temperature spiked, her breathing became labored, and the monitors shrieked their alarms. Medical staff rushed in, preparing for the worst, but Rex was already in action. He positioned himself across her chest, not his usual gentle presence, but with deliberate pressure. His breathing deepened, slowed, and, incredibly, Emma's began to match it. Her temperature started dropping, her heart rate stabilized. "He's teaching her body how to breathe," Dr. Martinez whispered in awe. "He's literally regulating her autonomic functions." It took 3 hours, but Emma stabilized without any medical intervention beyond what Rex provided. The medical team stood by, ready to act, but ultimately serving as witnesses to something that transcended their training. "In medical school," Dr. Chen said quietly, "they teach you to trust science, to rely on what can be proven. But this is asking us to expand our definition of what's possible." The next morning, Emma woke as if nothing had happened, but Rex looked exhausted. For the first time since her awakening, he accepted Morrison's offer of a proper meal, away from her bedside, though he kept looking back at her throughout. "He gave me some of his strong last night," Emma explained to her worried mother. "He has lots, but not unlimited. That's why we need to help him now." This led to a new phase in their relationship. Emma, with the serious determination only a child could muster, appointed herself Rex's caregiver. She insisted on brushing his fur daily, sang him songs she claimed would fill his strong tank back up, and shared elaborate stories about their future adventures. "When I'm all better," she told him during one grooming session, "we're going to help other kids. You'll find the ones who are sick like I was, and I'll tell them not to be scared. We'll be a team." Rex listened with the patience of a saint, occasionally offering a tail wag or gentle nuzzle. But Morrison noticed something else. The dog's eyes had taken on a different quality. Where once there had been the sharp alertness of a working canine, there was now something deeper, almost ancient. "He's changed," Morrison said to Dr. Martinez one afternoon. "It's like this experience has evolved him somehow." "Or maybe," Dr. Martinez suggested, "he's showing us what dogs have always been capable of. We just never created the circumstances to see it before." The academic community was divided. Some dismissed the observations as coincidence and anthropomorphism. Others called for more rigorous study. A few brave souls suggested that the bond between Rex and Emma represented something humanity needed to understand, not for the sake of science, but for the sake of our future relationship with the natural world. As Emma grew stronger, talks began about discharge. But this presented new challenges. How could they separate a child from the dog who'd saved her life? How could Rex return to police work after what he'd experienced? And what about the ongoing medical monitoring that suggested their connection was still actively contributing to her healing? "We'll figure it out," Sarah said firmly. She'd already begun the process of moving to a house with a yard, selling everything necessary to make it happen. Rex is family now. Where Emma goes, he goes. Morrison had harder decisions to make. Rex was technically police property, a valuable asset trained at considerable expense. But as he watched his partner carefully help Emma with her lunch, cutting her sandwich into small bites with surgical precision, he knew there was only one choice. "I'll retire him," he announced. "Hell, I'll adopt him myself if I have to, but he's not leaving her." The police chief, who'd been following the story like everyone else, surprised them all. "Officer Morrison, Rex has served with distinction for 7 years. He's saved countless lives, taken drugs off the streets, protected our community. I think we can agree he's earned the right to choose his final assignment." The paperwork was expedited. Rex would be officially retired with full honors, transferred to Morrison's ownership with an understanding that his primary duty would be to Emma. The department would even provide continued veterinary care, acknowledging that Rex's well-being was now a matter of public interest. But even as these practical matters were sorted out, the mysteries deepened. Emma's abilities, for lack of a better word, were becoming more pronounced. She would draw pictures of places she'd never been, only to have them recognized by staff members as their childhood homes. She knew when it would rain not by watching the sky, but by watching Rex. Most remarkably, she seemed to understand not just Rex, but other animals as well. "The birds tell Rex things," she explained one day, watching sparrows gather at the window. "About the weather and stuff. He translates for me." Fanciful? Perhaps, but her predictions were uncannily accurate. Dr. Martinez had a theory. What if the trauma to Emma's brain, combined with Rex's intervention during those critical hours, created new neural pathways? What if their connection literally rewired her brain to perceive things differently? "You're talking about evolution, Dr. Martinez," Chen said slowly. "Accelerated adaptation." "I'm talking about possibility," Dr. Martinez countered. "Everything we've observed suggests that consciousness, communication, and connection might be far more fluid than we assumed." The day finally came for Emma to leave the hospital. It was December now, snow falling softly outside, the world transformed into something clean and white. Emma walked out on her own feet, Rex beside her, their steps perfectly synchronized. The media was there, of course, but kept at a respectful distance by security. "What do you want to say to all the people who've been following your story?" a reporter called out. Emma looked up at her mother, then at Morrison, then at Rex. She seemed to be listening to something only she could hear. Finally, she smiled and said, "Rex says to tell everyone that love is the strongest medicine, and that every dog knows things humans forget. We just have to learn to listen better." The crowd fell silent, touched by the simple profundity of a child's words, or perhaps a dog's wisdom translated through a child's voice. As they drove away from the hospital, Emma in the back seat with Rex's head on her lap, Morrison driving while Sarah navigated, a new chapter began. The medical monitoring would continue. Researchers would visit. The questions about what had occurred in room 237 would persist. But for Emma and Rex, it was simpler. They were going home, together, bound by something that science might never fully explain but could no longer deny. They'd faced darkness and death, predators and pain, and emerged not just intact, but transformed. "Rex," Emma whispered, running her fingers through his fur, "are you happy?" The dog's tail thumped against the seat, and Emma giggled. "He says he's exactly where he's supposed to be, and so am I." Morrison glanced in the rearview mirror, watching his former canine partner, the decorated police dog who'd chosen love over duty, peace over protection, a little girl over all the glory of his career. And he realized that Rex hadn't just saved Emma. He'd shown them all something about the choices that matter, the connections that define us, and the love that transcends species, logic, and even life itself. The story would continue to ripple outward. Other hospitals would start experimenting with deeper animal integration. Researchers would pursue the mysteries Rex and Emma had revealed. Families with sick children would find hope in their tale. But in that car, driving through the falling snow toward a new life, there was only gratitude. A mother who'd almost lost everything. A cop who'd discovered his partner's true calling. A dog who'd refused to give up. And a little girl who'd returned from the darkness carrying gifts she was only beginning to understand. The world they were heading into would be different from the one they'd left. Emma would grow up knowing things others didn't, seeing connections others missed, bridging worlds others thought separate. Rex would age faster than normal, the cost of his vigil written in gray fur and tired eyes, but he would face it without regret. Their bond would be studied, celebrated, sometimes doubted, but never broken. Because some loves transcend the ordinary rules. Some connections defy explanation. And sometimes, in a small hospital room where death should have won, life finds a way to assert itself through the simple, unwavering devotion of a dog who knew that love was not just an emotion, but a force capable of calling souls back from the brink. The snow continued to fall, blanketing the world in white, and Emma began to hum a song she said Rex had taught her in the dark place. Morrison didn't recognize the melody, but it made him think of hope, of spring hidden beneath winter, of life waiting to bloom again. Sarah reached back to hold her daughter's hand, and for a moment, in that warm car surrounded by cold and beauty, they were perfect, whole, a family forged not by blood, but by something stronger. "Home," Emma said softly, though they were still miles away. "Rex says we're already home because we're together." And in that simple truth, spoken by a child who'd touched death and returned, translated from a dog who'd refused to let go, lay the answer to all the questions the scientists would ask. Love was the bridge. Connection was the miracle. And sometimes the most profound truths came not from laboratories or lecture halls, but from the unshakable bond between a little girl and the dog who'd promised to keep her safe, no matter the cost, no matter the distance, even if that distance was between life and whatever lay beyond. The car turned the corner, Rex's tail wagging slightly as he recognized the scent of their neighborhood. And Emma laughed. A sound like bells, like hope, like life itself refusing to be silenced. They were going home, all of them, to begin the next chapter of a story that had already changed the world, one heartbeat, one breath, one impossible, undeniable moment of connection at a time. As they pulled into the driveway of their new home, neighbors had gathered, holding signs that read, "Welcome home, Emma and Rex." Children pressed against the fence, eager to meet the famous dog. Adults wiped away tears, moved by the story they'd followed in the news. But Rex had eyes only for Emma, helping her from the car with careful precision, standing steady as she gripped his collar for support. "We're home, Rex," Emma whispered. "We're finally home." The dog looked up at her with those wise, tired eyes, and everyone present would later swear they saw him smile. Not the typical dog grin, but something deeper, more knowing. A smile that said the journey had been worth it, the vigil had ended in victory, and the bond forged in that hospital room would endure whatever came next.